Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me at the Nasdaq market site is Crawford Goodman, CEO of Smarsh, John Kain, Head of Financial Services Market Development at AWS, and Bill Meehan, Chief Compliance Officer, Swap Dealer at CIBC. We're here to discuss emerging trends of compliance and regulation technology. It is great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Welcome to Market Site. Kim, let's kick it off with you. Explain to us where Smarsh sits within the compliance ecosystem.
Thank you, Jill, and it's a delight to be here with you. Smarsh is the largest and most strategic company in the space of communication compliance. We effectively work primarily with banks, financial institutions, and some government entities and other corporations to capture, store, archive, protect, and analyze all of their communications data, from emails to text messages to WhatsApp messages to notes that are sent in Zoom or Teams, etc. So that is our role in the overall system.
And John, tell us about the work that you're doing at AWS.
Sure. So we provide reliable, scalable infrastructure that allows financial services companies to build the applications of the future. And so what we give them is global scale and the latest sets of technology to allow them to serve their customers more effectively, like we do at Smarsh.
All right, and Bill, your role at CIBC.
Yes, I cover the Global OTC Derivatives Compliance Program and Commodity Futures Program as well.
All right, and Kim, how will advances in AI and machine learning, these new emerging predictive technologies, how is that going to impact the compliance industry?
Well, we see tremendous advancements already underway. As I mentioned, Smarsh is the leading company in communications compliance. We're also the leading company working with both AI and Gen AI in communications and communications compliance. And what we are seeing is that the ability of these new tools to crawl through what is literally, in some cases, tens, in our case, 100 petabytes of data, to find the information that our institutions need to root out bad actors and protect the system is just tremendous.
Yeah, and it's a great point that you make about data, because John, data begets data, obviously. So what other emerging trends are you seeing in compliance and regulation technology that's going to help shape the future of financial markets?
So absolutely agree with Kim that generative AI really is that transformational technology that's really going to affect the way financial services broadly analyzes data. And particularly when we talk about communications data that's unstructured, that ability to have tools that give you real insight allow you to be much more efficient in the process. And we've already seen our customers achieve efficiency gains of over 30 to 70% in investigating sort of anti-money laundering or market abuse surveillance. But I think to make those things successful, we're really investing is the ability to kind of bring that data in a structured way to those kind of newer technologies, because without your organization's insights from a data perspective, you really can't achieve the efficiency gains that you really want to. And so we think that's fundamental to be successful. And I think secondly, is the technology is evolving so quickly that I think right now we think of large language models very broadly, but in financial services, there are certain domains that we expect that communicating advice to a retail investor is going to be different than two traders talking to each other on a fixed income desk. And we'll see the development of more tailored large language models that'll be more financial services specific. We don't think one model will rule them all, and it really is key to just bring choice to the ecosystem.
And Jill, a great example of that is at Smarsh. We just last week introduced the Intelligent Agent, which is for financial institutions to crawl through this data, utilize this data, and serve up, analyze the alerts in a way that gives them many more alerts on what's really wrong and gets rid of the alerts of things that actually were just false to begin with. But that's built on a highly specific large language model to an institution based on the large amount of data that they typically have in archive with us.
Right, and that's kind of the whole point, is that with all the data that is being collected, you want to use it in a way that's only going to advance business priorities. I mean, that's the whole point at the end of the day. Bill, what are the biggest challenges facing compliance teams as they onboard new technology? I mean, there's so many regulations that compliance teams have to adhere to in financial services.
There is. So we still have the old issue of data quality. It's still garbage in, garbage out. But I think what's new now, certainly in the communications compliance space, is there's so many different streams of data, different modalities. So we had the old Outlook, Teams, Zoom, phone turrets, and now we have mobile phones. We have things like Slack and WhatsApp, WeChat. So many different sources of data, which increases the volume of data that we have to store and retain, right? And then we need really good tools to effectively and efficiently monitor that communications data. And that's where the generative AI solutions and the machine learning solutions are really helpful to the compliance departments and supervision departments that I work with. And having a good partner with a vendor who can help you explain what the generative AI is doing is really helpful, because that's what the regulators expect.
Right. Of course, we're also trying to balance out client priorities as well.
Yes.
Right? So, Kim, I always find this to be an interesting question, because traditionally people think of compliance as a cost center, right? So with recent technological advancements, is there an opportunity to get innovative within the compliance function to drive business growth?
Well, there certainly is an opportunity, but first and foremost, what Bill just described of compliance, to keep the system safe and ensure that the institutions, their clients, and the system has integrity, is always going to be primary for compliance. But where the opportunity is in the quality of the data. Because what's effectively happened is these compliance organizations have collected and appropriately stored with people like Smarsh this data over many, many years. And we have we've imported it in a rich format, we've cleansed it, we've indexed it, so we've taken, as was mentioned, unstructured data and made it accessible and indexed and available. It's the quality of the data that allows for expansion beyond compliance. So for example, we are in the communications space. Imagine all of that communications data. You can see, institutions, if they choose to, can start to see within there the pattern of what happens when you make a sale. What was the back and forth? What were the trigger words? What was the communication? You can see the pattern of how your best performers actually communicate and behave. And you can even detect what their actual language is. So the opportunity to utilize the data itself for causes and reasons beyond compliance is actually quite great.
Yeah, it really does. And John, this leads me to the next question. When we think about technology and how it's advancing over the next few years, what is one of the things perhaps compliance departments are not thinking about and they really should be?
Yeah. So I want to come back to Kim's and then I'll kind of come on.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. When you think about what makes a good compliance analyst or a good compliance program, is that ability to kind of get insights into actually what's going on across the organization. And increasingly what we're seeing is generative AI is giving you the ability to see those insights. And so the tools and the data that you're actually leveraging in the compliance realm is the same ones that you're going to be looking for new product development, getting insights from market signals, understanding what your customers want. So I think that kind of platform from a technology perspective is going to be quite similar inside the organization from a business perspective as well as what the compliance teams does. And I think that's a real shift over the last few years that hasn't been true in the past. As far as how that changes compliance, one of the things I think is interesting is what you're seeing is on the generative AI, the generation part of generative AI, is that ability to take things like regulations and then sort of do a first pass at policy. And like when you have a policy, you do first pass at procedures, and the same thing, procedures actually develop controls. That what used to be a very separated first line, second line, third line of defense really can become much more streamlined. And that ability to kind of get leverage across from the same set of data, I think transforms the way an organization can think about compliance. It's no longer each individual silo line of defense, but it can be much more integrated from end to end. And I think that's something that in the past hasn't been possible, but I think we're on the cusp of being able to do that.
Yeah.
And Jill, closely related to that, we see with many institutions the value of having a platform across what was just described. So you have a critical provider capturing over 100 channels of any data you need in a consistent format, in a quality format, putting that into a platform, and then being able to deploy these tools across that entire platform.
Yeah, and that seems to be the consistent theme, whether you're talking about compliance, you can also relate it to risk management, you can relate it to cybersecurity functions as well, whereas it's not just so siloed where you're focusing on your own business line, but you have a bird's eye view of what's happening to get a more holistic picture of how compliance, risk management, cyber product lines, revenue parts of the business are interacting, engaging, and leveraging these data as one enterprise. I mean, think of the possibilities there, right?
And what we see is it's not just an evolution of the technology, it's also an evolution of the technology organization and how they work with platforms, how they work with data, and how they do that in a way that delivers greater value to the enterprise and greater protection to the enterprise.
Yeah, and Bill, this is a great question for you because with all the growth that we're seeing in financial markets and being able to leverage this data for new products and so forth, how do you see the culture of compliance departments evolving over time? Because nobody ever wants to get the call from compliance, but they could perhaps partner in a different way with their business lines.
Sure. And I want to expand the question a little bit and just say the culture of compliance across the firm. So as we talked about the different channels of data that we have now, the voluminous amount of data that we have. We are in this world where the enforcement is stronger because the regulators have stronger tools and technologies, and that is causing us to have to step up our game as far as having a culture of compliance across the firm, from the tone at the top, from the CEOs down to the desk heads. And I see that in action now. We always say in compliance, compliance is everyone's business, but now you're actually seeing that play out because there's been enforcement that has encouraged deterrence of violation. We all want to do the right thing and comply, but also stay competitive in the marketplace and be able to capture all different new communications that we want to use with our clients.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a revenue center if you think about it. Without compliance, making sure that the enterprise is able to function and live within the realm of regulatory framework, the business wouldn't exist, right? So I think it's a symbiotic relationship at the end of the day.
And compliance professionals are the perfect group to hold powerful data. So what we see with communications data is it's very powerful, it's going to be used more broadly. It's good that it's in the hands of the compliance organizations because the governance matters, the privacy matters, the access matters, and there's no one better in an institution to make sure that's well taken care of than the compliance teams.
I will say also the evolution in the compliance department is there's a new skill set of having someone who can do technology deployments, implementations, married with our subject matter experts and our vendors who are a key role in helping us meet the regulatory expectations.
Yeah. And this is an area where I think financial services firms lead from an industry perspective because we're so used and ingrained to data governance, controls, security as part of sort of a framework to manage data. And then from just an artificial intelligence perspective, sort of model governance and explainability and controls, that when it came to sort of like how to approach adopting these technologies responsibles, financial services firms were just sort of more prepared than I think other industries. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the leading adoption really coming through in the financial services side.
John, what advice would you give smaller firms, though, when it comes to being able to navigate the complexity of compliance and the related regulations?
Yeah, I think that's where it's really important to have the right partner, one that's committed to financial services and understands the regulated nature of the business. When AWS actually created a financial services kind of business unit over 8 years ago, some of our biggest investments were actually on the compliance and regulatory side, making sure that we could help our customers map our kind of technology controls back to the frameworks that are kind of essential from a financial services perspective. I think that's the same with kind of partners generally with financial services applications. Compliance and regulatory environments always change, and you need to have a partner that's going to change and adapt along with them. And finding the right partner that kind of helps do that is critically important. And then lastly, it's having one that's technology forward and leaning, right? A lot of the things we talked about in generative AI, a larger firm or organization can do that investment to actually bring those benefits to the organization. For most firms, they want those capabilities in their applications, right? So something like Smarsh and the compliance, like you don't want to leave the application or build something separate. You want to get the benefits of generative AI within that application. So you want firms that are kind of technology forward to bring those benefits to the users within their financial services applications without ever having to leave their environments.
Yeah, I mean, Smarsh is an example of that. We've worked very deep with financial services. It's still well over 80% of what we do. We work with clients from the smallest to the largest. We work with 19 of the 20 largest financial institutions globally. It's this focus on financial services, or even more broadly on regulated industries, that lets you take the technology and bring it to life on behalf of an institution.
I'm glad you brought that point up because from what I'm hearing, this could be leveraged across a number of industries rather than just financial services if you're thinking about Smarsh technology.
Well, the things that we've been discussing today at Smarsh, what we find is what we're really doing is preserving the truth protecting the truth, and now increasingly with AI tools, it's allowing compliance departments and institutions to really analyze, find, and value that truth. And we do expect, we already see it, the use of this and the value of it well beyond financial services. You know, in government, there's a Freedom of Information Act.
Right.
And there's more and more people and requirements to tap that Freedom of Information Act because people have a right to know what is truthful inside what's happened with their government and the documents there. And you can imagine many other industries, healthcare, utilities, et cetera, where the true facts of what has actually transpired between critical people really needs to be well understood.
Hopefully this technology will also make it more accessible as well. You know, trying to go through FOIA, it can, you know, it can be, it's a little bit of a challenge to navigate all of that, but it sounds as if this technology can also help to broaden that access or make it a more efficient process. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I know even just from my own personal experience, one of the things we do is kind of look at requests from our customers from a product perspective. When you have sort of account managers writing in little tidbits about like what they think they heard from a customer, and you think about tens or hundreds of thousands of requests, it's really hard to get signal from that. We've been able to use generative AI even internally to kind of summarize like what are the top 10 feature requests, right? And I've seen the same thing like with call centers. You actually transcribe calls, summarize them, and then suddenly it's like, what are the top 10 reasons my customers are calling me? And it allows you to think about that business differently and just be much more proactive in the way you approach business. And you haven't been able to get those signals in the past from previous versions of the technology.
Yeah. Another great example is we have a client already talking to us about, hey, I have a traditional CRM tool where I require all my salespeople to go in and enter information. I probably don't need that. What I need is an appropriate, effective linkage between all the information that's already sitting in the communications data in your archive, Smarsh, and allow that to feed my CRM tool. It's just another example of how quickly these things will start moving.
Yeah, and Bill, I think of the compliance function, and even if you think of other areas that are similar to it, tax is an example, how it can make the role so much more efficient. So, you know, we're talking about this off camera, but I think it's important to make that note here as well. It doesn't remove the people from that. It allows you to work on more strategic tasks versus having to go through those 10,000 messages and finding where the top 10 patterns are. Let the machines identify those patterns.
Right, yeah, so you still need the human element. You need subject matter experts. A lot of this machine learning, that means somebody has to teach it. You have to have a subject matter expert to teach it. You have to test it, as again, the regulators are gonna demand that. So you still have the human element. And you know, that's why it's important to use trusted technologies that understand the financial regulations so that they will work with you to help you understand it and test it.
Right.
100% agree. I mean, there are certain sets of artificial intelligence technologies you can totally govern. We have platforms that will kind of give you those insights. There are others like generative AI that by its nature is less explainable, and at least where the technology is today, it really does require sort of a human in that loop, especially when it comes to decision-making processes. But we're seeing is great efficiency in making people more efficient, kind of making them approach what are really the more interesting aspects of their jobs, what problems to solve, as opposed to collecting up the data that help figure out like what they should go focus on. And so it's really an enabler.
As a concrete example of that, the Smarsh Intelligent Agent that we just announced last week is looking at the level 1 analysts and saying, you know what, we can use generative AI and very specific large language models to essentially replace a good number of the level 1 analysts. But what that does is frees up more capacity and capability at level 2, and it also allows compliance departments to use their resources to find more problems, find more bad actors. So it is the role of humans with AI and generative AI is crucially important. It's not one or the other, it's the power of the combination.
Yeah. It certainly is, and it's going to be interesting to see what these conversations are like 3 to 5 years from now when we have the data to be able to support what this looks like going forward and what the next iteration is going to be.
Absolutely.
All right, appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.